right, we will go ahead and get started. I am Amy Lancaster King, Principal and Chief Consultant with Long Game Solutions. It's great to be here this morning for our Max Minutes. We've got an exciting agenda today. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to, as always, thank our sponsors who make our work possible. We are greatly appreciative of your support. Today, we've got David Giguere, Deputy Director, Research and Innovation at Atlanta Regional Commission. I'm excited. I haven't heard this data before, so I'm really excited this morning. And hopefully, I won't walk away too scared by the time we're done. So, with that, if you have questions, he's going to do a presentation. Feel free to use the chat box and the Q&A function, and I will field all the questions for David as we go through, but we'll let him go through his presentation and then get to all of your questions, but don't hesitate. Awesome. With that, David, I will let you have it.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is David Giguere. I work for the Atlanta Regional Commission, and my presentation today is focused on AI, but maybe also adding in a couple elements that you had not considered, and that would be humanoid robots and smart glasses. So I think everyone at this point is well familiar with artificial intelligence. But I'm going to maybe add in a little nuance to that, and hopefully you'll have some great questions for me. I'd love to chat about this at the end. So let's get started. There we go. So ARC, I think most of you are familiar with the Atlanta Regional Commission, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of background. ARC is the Regional Planning and Intergovernmental Coordination Agency for the 11 county Atlanta region. And you can see here, ARC's vision is one great region. And so we use this vision to orient us as we work to fulfill our mission, embody our values, and to achieve our goals. So again, you're probably aware with a lot of the work that ARC does, but just to kind of give you a sense of the scope here, we have a variety of planning functions beyond our 11 county core. And I won't really spend much time on this slide, but I just included it as a way to say that we do a lot of really interesting and impactful work across a variety of geographies. And if you're not familiar with our work, then I would encourage you to look us up, read a little bit more about ARC. A little bit about my background. I've been with ARC for 25 years. I went to Georgia State and have a degree in cartography and GIS. So why am I talking about AI? Well, it became sort of a new career path for me within ARC. I started off in geospatial technologies. I mentioned that GIS degree. And then that sort of transitioned into technology more broadly. I was doing some application development, web development, things like that, building proof of concept tools, things of that nature. And then that slowly transitioned into emerging technology. And I began spending quite a bit of time paying attention to new technologies as they were showing up on the scene. And that led me to strategic foresight or futures thinking. So a little bit of all of those things are kind of blended into my work these days, 25 years later. So I currently work in ARC's Office of Research and Innovation as the deputy for ARC's first Chief Research and Innovation Officer. Her name is Dr. Ann Carpenter. And in addition to supporting Ann and our research and innovation team, I lead three unique efforts at ARC. The first one is our Emerging Technologies Roundtable, and this brings together subject matter experts from around our region to explore how a broad portfolio of emerging technologies could impact the way that we live, work, and travel in our region over the next decade and beyond. And the second group is ARC's Strategic Innovation Group. And so this was formed about a year and a half ago. And our work is really focused on amplifying a culture of innovation across ARC, as well as introducing strategic foresight skills to our colleagues, and really to help all of us consider sort of the long time horizon impacts that our work may have on the region. And the last thing I'll mention is I co-lead our internal artificial intelligence user group. So we have an AI user group that brings together colleagues that are interested in AI issues, share experiences, present new tools and techniques. And it really has a broad range of perspectives included there. So some folks are already quite interested in using these tools. They're using them regularly, and other folks have a degree of caution and concern, which is um, absolutely something that I think all of us should have as we use these tools. Um, and so it blends together, I think, a lot of nice perspectives, a very balanced approach to how we are thinking about artificial intelligence at ARC. So each of these efforts, I spend, as you could imagine, a large amount of time researching, particularly the emerging technologies, and closely monitoring something that we call signals of change. That's sort of a term that we use in the strategic foresight world. And we're identifying signals of change as really this foundational part of our strategic foresight practice. And it helps us to consider possible futures for our region. And this presentation is not going to be, it's not about predicting our region's future. I'm not going to give you a prediction about where AI is heading. This is really just some of those signals that we're seeing, the information that we're receiving, and coming up with maybe a potential scenario about how our workforce could look different in the coming years. I mentioned the Emerging Technologies Roundtable. I'm not going to spend any time on this slide, but I just wanted to point out that this is kind of our portfolio of technologies. AI is one of those, but we also are paying close attention to things like, 3D printed homes and supply chain and logistics advancements. So it really covers quite a few different topic areas. So just to give you a little context about the presentation for today, we're really going to be paying close attention to a lot of the articles that we've been seeing over the last several years, and this, I think, if we look at these as signals, points to a certain direction, and I'm just going to begin here with what feels like quite a long time ago. This was an article from, sorry, this is Fast Company on agentic AI, and this is from December 2024. Again, feels like a really long time ago, but it's really only been what, a 2.5 years? No, year and a half, excuse me. And then on the right, we have an article from Axios, and this was from May of 2025. And so in 2024 and 2025, we really began to notice a pattern emerging around what felt like contradictory information. Either AI is going to, destroy all white-collar jobs, or it's not really going to do much of anything to the job market. And this October 2025 Brookings article suggests that at the time of the article that AI really had not significantly impacted jobs. So we find some similar stories here. This one from Bank of America, a study that was reported by Forbes in early November 2025, suggesting again that the impact from AI on white-collar jobs was minimal. And this was followed a month later by another Forbes article that was focused on the iceberg index, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and the hidden exposure to AI that cognitive work has. And so this was maybe shifting that a little bit. We're starting to see some movement around the level of concern. But on top of all this, we also have stories like this one from February 2026, where Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of the fintech company Block, which owns Square and Cash App, they were announcing cutting 4,000 jobs, or roughly 40% of their workforce. And they connected this directly to more efficient AI workflows. It is possible that AI isn't to blame, but rather this was a staffing correction followed by a period of following a period of overhiring, and they were using AI really as a scapegoat. So we began to see language around this. They would claim one thing, but maybe we weren't entirely sure if that was what was happening. This is another one from March, where Oracle is laying off 30,000 employees. while also doubling down on AI spending. There was an article from earlier this month mentioning cuts in employment at Coinbase. We talked about Block, but also Pinterest, Shopify, and really that difficulty in understanding what exactly is driving the layoffs. And there was a Quartz article from Tuesday of this week that announced 10% of Meta's workforce is being cut, with many of the existing roles being redirected to their AI efforts. So these are just a few articles from the thousands that have been written over the last few years. And I just included those to kind of give you a snapshot about some of the things that we're reading that are informing our work. So the big question is, what's really happening here? Are these announcements evidence of some kind of structural shift? Is it a convenient narrative? Is it something that the OpenAI CEO Sam Altman refers to as AI washing? So thinking about it from the perspective of investors and the stock market, we understand that investors reward growth, efficiency, foresight, and they punish poor hiring decisions. So if your company is announcing that you don't need to hire for new roles because AI is helping increase productivity, or if you're laying off staff because existing staff is that much more productive, you're, I think, signaling to the market that your increased efficiency and adoption of new technology is this path toward increased profitability for your company. And then you can contrast that with messaging from maybe a CEO that's not as aware. And you wouldn't want to be the CEO saying we staffed up several years ago because we really wanted everyone to think that business was great. But it turns out we overhired. That message is not going to be rewarded. So it feels like they're just being careful about the messaging and they want to come out on top. They want to make sure that their shareholder value remains. And maybe they're not telling us the whole story. So some of these companies, it's likely that they overhired years ago and they're using this now as an excuse. But it also could mean that maybe AI really is making those kinds of changes internally. So now we'll talk a little bit about the iceberg index and some of the white collar jobs that the iceberg index is helping to kind of understand where that overlap is between AI capabilities and cognitive or knowledge work. So the iceberg index, I mentioned this at the top of the presentation. This is part of what's called the Iceberg Project. And this was work that was being done by MIT and Oak Ridge National Laboratory that they published in November, I believe, of 2025. And this is an article from the Neuron that I think sums it up pretty well. If you're interested in following AI and kind of watching for the advancements in that space, there is a website. It's the neuron.ai. You can do a search for the Neuron, you'll find it. And it's a great, I think, a great article, a great website to subscribe to receive updates on AI advancements. So it's one that I've found probably consistently the most useful, and I get these regularly and try to read every one of them. So the Neuron for this article sums up really that Project Iceberg. MIT, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, they built a population level simulation of 151 million US workers, and they identified 32,000 skills that these workers had across 923 occupations. So they built this digital representation of the US labor force to understand where today's AI capabilities intersect or overlap with human skills. And they looked at how many of the 32,000 skills overlap with existing AI systems, and they found that the overlap between worker skills and AI capabilities resulted in nearly a 12% share of wage value. And I want to make sure I stress that. They're looking at where that overlap exists between AI capabilities and worker skills, and they're concerned about wage value. So 12% wage value of the American workforce being exposed to automation. That doesn't mean that it's going to be automated, but that there are skills that potentially could be automated in the future, and that amounts to about 12%, just under 12% of the share of wage value. So the article goes on to summarize that what is often reported only focuses on a small percent of the jobs being affected. But the real threat is, again, the jobs that AI has the capability to automate, but hasn't yet. So I wanted to point out when this was last released. I checked fairly regularly, and hopefully they didn't release an update like this morning because I didn't look this morning. But up until at least a day or two ago, it was last indexed in September. So September 30th, 2025 is when they really stopped looking at that exposure. And we haven't seen another update yet. It's been over 6 months. And so that's a fairly significant amount of time in this space. And since then, we've seen things that are getting very close to what I think most would consider agentic, and that would be agents that can perform tasks on their own without a human saying, yes, please continue all the time. And so these multi-step autonomous AI agents like OpenClaw and Claude Cowork, those have been released since this was updated. So we should expect that the next update, if there is one, would show a significantly higher percent of skill overlap and wage exposure. So while we have not seen an update to the index, we have seen a couple articles pop up on MIT Media Lab's page. And this was one from back in February suggesting that they were continuing to monitor the problem, and that the impact is really changing faster than the measurement allows. And it goes on to reiterate the difficulty in measuring adoption or understanding the size of the disruption to white-collar jobs. And I mentioned white-collar jobs specifically, again, because the iceberg index is only focused on cognitive skills. It does not provide research on the potential impact that AI may have on physical labor, like what we would find typically in blue-collar trade work. So we're going to kind of shift over now to some of the trades. I once strongly held the belief that one approach to future-proofing jobs was really to begin shifting new workforce entrants, as well as reskilling existing folks like myself toward the trades. And articles like this from Forbes, this was April 2025, suggested that becoming a tradesperson was a reasonable automation-proof career choice. And based on my knowledge and understanding of the velocity of change in artificial intelligence and something called embodied AI, which I'll talk about in a moment, I was pretty confident that pursuing a job as an electrician or a welder or a plumber would likely remain, a viable career choice for maybe an entire career cycle. For, let's say, 30 years, you could be an electrician without really worrying about automation. So now we're going to talk about humanoid robots and something called embodied AI. And I'll just take a moment to kind of explain what all of that means. So this is an example image from a generative AI product. I think I produced this in ChatGPT, but it's just a very generic image, not company specific in any way. But I just did this to include sort of the shapes that you would see related to embodied AI. These can include autonomous delivery vehicles that are using sensors to navigate roads or sidewalks. You have humanoid and service robots like robotic vacuum cleaners, or maybe like point of sale robots for retail, hospitality. You have drones for surveillance or delivery. You have robotic systems like surgical robots and in the healthcare environment. And really, all of these systems integrate machine learning with sensors and actuators and motors to perceive, learn, and act within the physical world to achieve some goal, some specific goal. And these physical systems do not have to be humanoid, like the one you see on the left side. And in fact, many are not that kind of form factor. So we have systems like this. This is a human scale robotic waiter. This was from an article in March of 2025. And the idea was really to help fill labor gaps in Japan. This is one example of how they are thinking about handling a lower amounts of labor available to things like restaurants. And then this is from a company called Unitree. This is one of their humanoid robots handling luggage at Haneda Airport in Japan. Another example of how they may use robots when it comes to labor shortages. And the robots can scale up, right? They don't have to necessarily be something that's in at an airport or in a restaurant. They can be construction-sized robots that are capable of doing building scale work, like this example here. So robotic systems like these, they're in our factories today. They're on our sidewalks today. You may have seen some of the food delivery robots around the Atlanta area. That's happening today. And Morgan Stanley is projecting that in 25 years, we can expect to see 1 billion, with a B, humanoid robots moving among us. And again, that humanoid robot form factor, that's what we're looking at here on the cover of Time. It's massively more complex, obviously, than a robotic vacuum, but it's important to sort of understand how these robots are operating. Um, there are things called vision language action models, and those have been advancing pretty quickly, and they allow companies like Figure AI, which is the company behind the robot on this Time magazine cover. It allows those robots to learn to interact with our physical world. And one approach to training humanoid robots is through first-person video and these VLAs, or vision language action models. Um, you can think of those sort of akin to large language models, or LLMs, that we're accustomed to when we talk about generative AI. And they allow robots to perform human actions after training on thousands of hours of first-person video. And we're seeing this entirely new industry emerge that's built around recording humans performing all sorts of tasks, some of those very mundane. I mean, they might be folding clothes or making a bed or vacuuming a house. These are being recorded. Uh, Again, seeing a lot of different companies popping up around the world, really. It's not limited to the United States, of course. And this one was from Y Combinator. This was, I think, about a month and a half ago. Another company coming up with their own sort of business model around how they would collect first-person video to build a very large data set that companies could purchase to then train their robots on. So the companies are relying on first-person video collection, and they're using everything from strapping an iPhone to a user's forehead to things like this, these smart glasses. This happens to be Ray-Ban's Meta glasses, which are really becoming ubiquitous. I think we're moving in that direction. It looks like last year, 2025, Meta sold over 7 million pairs of smart glasses, and I think that they had tripled sales year over year to that 7 million mark. And earlier this year, I think when I was doing some research on this, they were dominant by far. They had maybe 85% of market share. So the Meta smart glasses, Ray-Ban smart glasses, are very, very popular, and they come in sort of different capabilities. Some are simply designed to, take pictures or video, and others can actually allow uh, uh, like an overhead, I'm sorry, a view on screen on the lens for the user, so they can provide um, instant information to the user. But many of these are simply used as they've been used actually for several years to take pictures and video, but it's first person. So that's kind of the significant um, uh, feature with these glasses. And that first person perspective is really valuable when you're starting to train humanoid robots. So companies like Figure, companies like Meta, they're not alone in this pursuit. This is an example of a pair of glasses from Amazon, and these are smart glasses that are being supplied to delivery drivers. And they're using these smart glasses to help drivers more safely drop off packages, be able to capture that kind of proof that they had dropped it off. We often see them doing that with maybe a phone or some device. This can do that passively, where it just shows that it's been dropped off. We see it's at the right address. We're also monitoring maybe any dangers or threats or safety issues. Um, but it's also collecting all of this information from, getting out of the vehicle, crossing the sidewalk, stepping over the curb, walking up to the front door. All of that is being included as well. Now, right now, they are describing this as systems to help improve the safety of their drivers, but you could also imagine a scenario where maybe this is going to be used to help automate delivery systems in the future. So this is why companies are pouring billions of dollars into the development of humanoid robots and other robotic form factors as well, and why they're spending all this time and effort building AI models to power all of them. Half of the global gross domestic product is related to human labor, and global GDP is something like 120, maybe a little more than that, trillion dollars. So the total addressable market for human labor is around, I think now it's this is actually just a few months old, but now it's something like 66, 67 trillion dollars. So I'm sorry, it is around this number, but it's nearly the market capitalization of the entire S&P 500. That is around 66, 67 trillion dollars. So half of global GDP associated with human labor, that dollar amount is nearly the entire S&P 500. And companies like Figure are angling to pursue a piece of that very, very large pie. Figure, I mentioned them several times. It happens to be one that I've spent a good bit of time researching and learning about, but there's many, many companies in the space, both in the US and abroad. We have a few examples here just to kind of give you a sense, again, of what these look like. We have Neo, which is on the top. Neo is by a company called 1X Technologies. In the middle, that is Figure, and on the bottom is Tesla's robot called Optimus. And on the right-hand side, we have one from a company called Aptronic. And I'm going to show you a quick clip of what this kind of looks like in action. Hopefully this will show up for you. Okay, I think it stopped, but we can stop it right there. It gives you a sense of the movement of it. This is this is Figure AI's third generation figure robot, and it's running on their second generation vision language action model called Helix. And this video is from January of 2026. Um, Brett Adcock, who is the CEO of Figure AI, has mentioned a price target once these reach manufacturing scale to be in the $20,000 to $30,000 per unit range. Now, we've watched several videos, and this one probably doesn't, you can tell that it's probably not going to replace your dishwashing duties just yet. It is still relatively slow, but when you compare where we were maybe 6 months ago on this, and you watch these videos and you start to notice the changes in movement, the speed in movement, you begin to see which direction this is pointing, and they are advancing in this space very, very quickly. Um, Another little kind of Easter egg they've included in this video on the right-hand side of the stove on the kitchen counter, you'll see something that looks a bit like a drone, and that is an example, a little model of Archer Aviation's Midnight electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So Brett Adcock, CEO of Figure AI, is also the co-founder of Archer Aviation, and Archer has a manufacturing plant in Covington. Um, and so they left that in there. I thought that was kind of a nice little Easter egg for folks that are paying attention to Figure and Archer and some of these other technologies. Okay, so let's look to China now, where Unitree and Agibot, some other companies in this space, are really rapidly, rapidly ramping up production of humanoid robots. And this was a Forbes article from April that was really talking about advancements in the space. Last year, total global shipments reached 13,000 units. Not that many. Doesn't sound that impressive. By the end of 2026, they're expecting that number to be about 10 times that. And these are robots that can work on our factory floors. They can fold laundry, they can do dishes, they can handle things like picking packages in a warehouse, stuff like that. Now, when we start talking about scale, maybe 13,000 last year isn't a big deal. Maybe 10 times that isn't really that impressive either when we think about, global production. This is the direction that we're thinking about scale, though. Tesla is targeting 1 million robots per year being manufactured in their Shanghai Gigafactory. And this was formerly building vehicles. They also have something like this in mind for the Fremont, California plant that was previously building Model S and Model X cars. They want to retrofit that or refit that to build Optimus robots. Um, a million robots sounds like a crazy target to me, but they were producing over 900,000 vehicles in this plant. So kind of understanding that context, I think, helps to understand what is possible potentially. I see a question pop up in the chat. What is the life expectancy of a home robot housekeeper? Will they come with warranties like a car? Um, I don't have an answer for that yet, but I'm going to guess that the early adopters will probably lease a robot and which would come obviously with some kind of a warranty as well, but that we would not necessarily be buying them outright. Maybe we would have a subscription, or maybe we would lease them, um, and uh, and they would just swap them out as needed. I suspect, like many of the, let's say, software experiences that we have, there those early adopters will be sort of maybe beta testing to a degree as well. And so I would expect once they reach sort of consumer availability, that we would see relatively short-term leases, really to begin to test what it's like at scale in homes across the world. So likely warranted, likely some kind of a subscription, maybe even purchasing different um, capabilities. So the same robot may be able to, wash your dishes and do your laundry, and then maybe you would, apply for or pay for a monthly subscription to some new feature that can do some other things around your house, and you can toggle those features on and off. I think I could imagine just another app on your phone where you're allowing your humanoid robot to do different things around your house as needed. And we can talk more about that at the end if you'd like to chat about it. So we have the iceberg index providing us insight into AI skills that really are overlapping with cognitive or white collar jobs and that resulting wage share exposure. We're watching developments in first person video capture and investments in humanoid robotics companies to help us keep an eye on AI's potential impact on blue collar jobs. Um, we're aware of the AI impact or the potential impact on white collar jobs. I feel like um, we're not as prepared, or we haven't had that conversation about the potential impact that humanoid robots could have on blue collar jobs. Uh, and I think we should be having those discussions now. Um, I'm in previous presentations, I didn't go too far beyond that, and it generally left people quite concerned, and rightly so. Um, I don't know that these humanoid robots are necessarily going to, upend blue collar job markets anytime soon. I think we're still looking at quite a few years before that's an issue. And and it was important to really kind of move past this point with maybe spending some time looking at all of the ways that everything I've described and the trajectory that we're seeing could be wrong. So I'm going to spend a few minutes really kind of talking about maybe a counterpoint or counterpoints to why all of these signals that I just shared may not point to a future that would challenge our workforce. Um, so my thinking, I try to keep it fluid and flexible, and it certainly has evolved quite a bit over the last 6 months. I have learned over the years that a byproduct of really being too close to the research is that I'm often overestimating the speed or the impact that these issues and technologies can have. And so I suspect sort of my initial concerns about AI-driven job displacement, whether that's blue collar or white collar, was probably a little overblown, and that I really needed to kind of lift up and sort of focus and consider some other perspectives. We see the amount of investment pouring into these industries. We see the velocity of technological improvement and really we can connect the dots and see that direction of change. But we still need to consider, what else are we missing? And I'm going to talk just for a moment about this particularly large blind spot that I have or had because I'm learning more about this now. And this is something called the lump of labor fallacy. And if you're an economist, and I am not obviously an economist, you probably arrived at this long ago, right? You probably had this line of thinking when discussion about AI and the impact on workforce when that conversation first began. The lump of labor fallacy describes a mistake that we can make in assuming that there is a finite number of jobs to be done. And we know, though, that that is not the case, right? We know that an amount of work is not fixed. The economy can grow. It can create more jobs. It can change in productivity and technology and population. As those things increase, it can create more jobs. So our economy can expand, new jobs can and will be created, and there's really no limit to the needs and desires of humans. So we've seen this happen in the past. We can likely expect a similar result in the future. Although I'll point out one one thing that maybe historically we had that we don't now, and that is more time to absorb that technological or societal change. So the velocity feels very impressive right now. It feels like things are moving more quickly, maybe than we could absorb those changes. Um, but this does, I think, help kind of counterbalance how I had been thinking about it. This is from A16Z. It's just an op-ed from Andreessen Horowitz's website. So you can take a look at that if this is interesting to you. And I'll end it here on this story from The Guardian. This was May 13th. Um, Obviously, a lot of advancements in AI taking place in China. And I found this interesting and maybe a little hopeful that the way they were thinking about job replacement or displacement when it comes to AI, there was this mechanism in place called a significant change in objective circumstances that employers often pointed to as the cause for dismissal or demotion or lower income. That would be sort of their way to layoffs or their way to reducing headcount. They would call on this thing called a significant change in objective circumstances. And so recently that happened, and someone I think was offered a lower paying job, um, and they said, "I'm not going to take it." And they went to court, and the result was uh, that they said these companies cannot use this significant change in objective circumstances as a cause for demotion or replacement when it comes to a company choosing to adopt AI and benefit from the increases in efficiency and things like that. So I thought that was interesting. It would point to maybe some protections that could be in place. This happens to be in China, but we could see this maybe shifting as a model, maybe to be used around the world. But I felt like that was a fairly positive step toward protecting jobs. So a couple things I wanted to mention before I finish. Uh, just a few thoughts on where do we go from here. First, the negative impact. I mean, a lot of this feels obviously very negative. The negative impact of AI on the trajectory of our lives is not an inevitable outcome. So, as we talk about in strategic foresight, there is no one singular future. We have a multitude of futures that are before us, and we each have agency over our own lives. So, I'm going to say that. I'll also mention that we really should all cultivate our spirit of curiosity. We should all accept that we really need to be lifelong learners. I know that that's become sort of a buzzword. People say that quite a bit, but I think it's true. We should each be diversifying our professional and our personal sort of portfolio of skills, just as we would, manage risk and exposure in investments. And I believe you can improve your resiliency and value by seeking new opportunities, whether that's within your own, workplace or outside of that, outside of your normal work. And the last thing is we know that AI doesn't solve every problem or always improve our lives. And so there's a growing body of work that's suggesting that just as we used GPS and adopted that to get around town, that has impacted our ability to navigate without it. And we're seeing that the more we offload our cognitive tasks to things like ChatGPT and Claude, the more our cognitive abilities are declining. So we really need to be picky about, what tasks we're allowing AI to manage for us. Um, we should really be careful and at least be aware of when we are using these tools, when we shouldn't use these tools also. And ultimately, without wrestling with or thinking through some of these problems that we may take the easy button and hit, a generative AI to solve, it's really impossible for us to synthesize this information and arrive at a deeper understanding of ourselves and our world. So I'm going to leave it there, and there's my contact info. Feel free to shoot me an email, get in touch, and I guess we can open it up to questions.
David, thank you so much. Yes, a little bit alarming. I think there are some opportunities there as well. Um, One of the things that I wanted to ask, and then I think Elizabeth has a great question on your iceberg and humanoid piece, like especially around the iceberg part, it doesn't look like it can wholly replace, right? Like it can AI can do a lot of the skills within a job function, but
That's right.
not every skill in that
Yeah.
job function, right? And so that
Yes.
that it yes, you can do more with less people, but there are still parts that can't be done by AI. And I can tell you right now, if I'm like doing a major contract, I'm going to want a person involved, right? It's like there's some things that can't. So I think that there's elements there that yes, but what are those skills that AI can't do that we really need to focus on, I guess, is kind of the question there. Um, and then the other piece I just keep thinking about like the speed at which some of the implementation of these AI tools at the corporate level because they're not at the societal level, right? Like society isn't benefiting, corporations are. And at some point, are they not cannibalizing their own consumer base? If they replace all workers with robots and push to do that, you're at some point, where is your consumer base? If, I just feel like there's an imbalance that we're really going to start leaning towards soon that we need to be careful. And that kind of ties to, in part, to Elizabeth Jones' question, which I really think is a good question, is what happens to paying into Social Security, Medicare, federal, and state taxes if humanoids replace humans? Won't these social services run out of funds, or will companies have to pay into these funds for the robots?
Yeah. So I will see if you may have to repeat part of that question. That was a little earlier, but let's see if I can get this right. Um, so obviously yeah, this is a concern. We want to make sure that, well, we want to make sure that people can remain employed if they choose to be employed. Um, how will we continue as a society, um, as a consumer society, how will we continue to buy things if we don't have jobs and income coming in? And I think that's um, probably one of the questions that gets asked quite a bit. And I don't know that there's a very clear answer to that. Um, I think that maybe a part of that question um, could be answered with that lump of labor fallacy. So the idea that um, we would transition into other types of work and that would occur naturally in some way, that new jobs would be created and people will transition into those new jobs. But to your point about the speed and velocity you mentioned, um, I think that is the challenge, right? It feels to me that there will be a disconnect for some period of time as we muddle through this, if again, this is the direction of things. Um, when it comes to things like paying taxes, if we are in an environment where there is a significant number of people that are no longer working as a result of these advancements, whether that's white collar or blue collar, um, the most common, let's call it a solution. I don't know that it is a solution, but the most common thing mentioned is that there would be some type of universal basic income or some type of taxation um, on the company side that as they displace jobs that they have some kind of proportional tax increase that would help offset or help support those that maybe their jobs are being displaced. So that's something that we see in conversation. I just when I think about that though, that like culturally, that's not something that we've embraced. I don't know if that is that would take some kind of it feels like it would take some kind of societal shift for us to be comfortable with that, or for us to expect that to happen. Um, I don't know. We have, uh, let's say, a limited social safety net compared to some other countries that would provide for citizens, and that hasn't really been in keeping, I think, with sort of the spirit of a capitalist um, society. So I'm not sure how that would actually play out in practice. Um, yeah, and I think you also mentioned about the iceberg index, and I want to point out that there are a lot of other studies. I didn't include those slides, but there are a lot of other studies that actually list out. They have their own approach to sort of looking at exposure and understanding where that AI skills exposure is, where it overlaps with existing jobs, and they have a lot of lists out there that kind of show, depending on the type of work, what amount of that job is exposed to automation. And those are very interesting. I would encourage folks to take a look at that. Um, if you happen to be in one of those occupations, maybe it gives you a little bit of a heads up, and that you can, if you are concerned about this happening, you can begin thinking about how else you may want to train yourself, or a different direction you may want to take your career.
Thank you, David. So I want to go back, Elizabeth's questions, and you may have touched on this a little bit about what happens to paying into Social Security, Medicare, federal and state taxes,
Hmm.
and if the humanoids are replacing the human workforce, right? Um,
Sure.
and you kind of alluded, like we're in kind of a catch-22 there, right?
Yeah, I don't know that there would be a way around that unless these companies were somehow taxed in some way to offset that. Again, that's assuming that those jobs that the people that would be receiving those benefits, um, that those benefits would continue to be funded for those folks by people working in some job somewhere, some occupation, and that we would continue to have sort of that model in place for our society. Um, if people cannot find jobs, then I don't know that there's really a way around it other than taxing those companies that have put folks, um, out of work. But
Yeah.
again, I don't know if that will work.
Yeah. Lots of, I think that's kind of the more questions than answers that it's bringing,
Absolutely. I
right?
wish I had an answer for that.
Yeah. Chris has a question. Is the race to adopt or lead AI advances short-sighted on the part of the private sector? We've seen consumer sentiment shift recently to nostalgic technology, records, DVDs, and more opportunities to connect. Could it not be feasible that future consumers will prefer the human touch? If so, should businesses also be cultivating talent pipelines? Would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for the question, Chris. And thanks, Elizabeth, also for your question. Um, so I had this was a thought that I had during COVID when we were having deliveries to our homes where people would, drop them off on the porch, um, and I was imagining uh, kind of the direction of things, like living in this, COVID era. Uh, would we would that move automated delivery? Would that move along more quickly as a result of that? Like we had this memory of that experience, and is that something that would somehow increase the speed in which that was adopted? And so, kind of spinning off from that idea, I was, thinking about some of the technologies that would deliver things to our front door, and that we would then have in some, maybe it's many years from now, in some future time, we would have that human touch, that human experience would then become sort of the concierge experience, that we would then maybe pay more for having someone show up at your door, someone that you could chat with, Um, that I could see. It's interesting thinking about how something we take for granted today being something that could be like a bespoke service in the future, in a future, and this is likely decades away, but in a future where we had ubiquitous automated delivery of some sort. Uh, so I'm not sure if that really totally answers your question, but I would think that that the let me just quickly skim through that again. Um, I would think that you would see as these technologies begin to take hold, maybe new businesses focusing around. You had mentioned the that talent pipeline. Maybe new businesses would be focusing around a very special, human touch type of service, where you're paying a little more for the UPS driver to come to your front door, and maybe they offer additional services as well. Maybe uh, in addition to just having that 5-second conversation at your front door, they could also help in other ways that are more human oriented.
We've got 2 minutes left and we've got two questions. So I'm going to get those to you and then
Okay.
just speed answers.
Okay.
From a higher education perspective, students express concern about employment. For example, will AI fully replace computer programmers and should students still be encouraged to pursue this pathway? And then, is there any privacy issue with humanoids being in certain homes, higher income homes for sure, recording family data and conversation? Will privacy go out the window? Do companies have limits? As
Okay.
fast as you can, David.
Sure. The last question first. Do companies have limits? I don't think so. Will privacy go out the window? I think it already has. Maybe that's I'm being a little flippant with that, but I think that we would accept a level of intrusion if we feel like the convenience outweighs it. So I think we've experienced that today. I think we've allowed additional uh, surveillance in our lives at because we believe that the convenience or the safety that we perceive it um, providing us is worth it. So that's kind of how I feel about the privacy issue. That's my personal opinion. I think some of those higher income homes are going to be the early adopters, and they will maybe think of it as a novelty, and they can show off their humanoid robot. Maybe they won't be as concerned about the privacy issues. And then earlier, let's see. Concerns about employment. So one of the interesting problems that we may have with employment when it comes to this is the lower tier jobs. So like the entry level programmer job, those feel threatened right now. And and I don't know that I would necessarily encourage a computer science degree right now, although we still need folks that can program, that understand what well-structured code is, and that can vet the output of some of these tools that we're using for coding. So we still need that. But if we continue to have an erosion, let's say from those entry-level jobs on into the mid-level jobs, we'll wind up with just this top, uh, you know, highly expert, long tenured roles existing with no one to follow those roles. So it's almost we will have, I think, a problem in the future where we don't have enough um, highly experienced computer science folks because they've never had an opportunity to come up through the ranks and grow their knowledge.
All right. David, thank you so much. This has been an eye-opening uh, presentation with again lots of questions and a lot to be determined. Thank you all for staying on. I know we're over a few minutes. Before we leave, if you haven't filled out the survey, please do that. We really need that information from you so that we can gauge what Max is doing and give some feedback too. Lastly, I want to let, if you aren't a Max member, please join. Obviously, you'll get great content like this, but you get access to even more stuff by being a member. So we'd love for you to join. And then we've got upcoming June 26th is our next Max Minutes. We are still working on that. So as soon as we have the topic locked in, we will share that with you. We've got a Max Academy coming up in July, which is on AI. We're about to lock in the date. As soon as that date is locked in, we'll share that. And then application open for Leadership Max class of 2027. So get ready for that. And then finally, as always, thank you to our sponsors. We really appreciate your support. And I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday weekend. Thank you so much, everybody.
Take care. Thank you.